This is Central Texas Living with Ann Harder.
Hello, I'm Ann Harder. Welcome to Central Texas Living, the podcast. You know, the COVID pandemic has exacted a pretty heavy toll on a lot of people for a lot of reasons. Of course, job losses meant an uncertain future for folks, and then that has led into mental health challenges. And we're seeing an opioid abuse crisis even before we'd ever heard of COVID and the coronavirus. But joining me now is DeLisa Russell, and it is a delight to have you. You're Group CEO at Promises Behavioral Health, Right Step Houston. Of course, here in Central Texas, we got to know each other through the Veterans One Stop.
That's right.
That you headed up and did such a magnificent job. And I know we were all sorry to see you move to the Houston area, to the Woodlands, but it's great to have you back.
Well, thank you. And you know, a part of my heart is always here in Central Texas. We'll talk some more later about how I want to be able to continue to help Central Texas, but the people here are so gracious, and what a wonderful collaborative community. And I think that it's wonderful that we're talking about this very difficult topic right now.
Well, the mental health problems that have come out of COVID are numerous. There was, as I mentioned, an opioid crisis before that, and the numbers are really kind of staggering. Over the past 20 or so years, nearly 400,000 Americans have died from an overdose of opioids.
Yes, they were saying in 2019, before we ever even heard the word COVID, that opioid deaths were up to like 70,000. And then just recently, in December of 20, they said that in our country, since we started looking at COVID, that the deaths were up at least 20% more than that. So this is certainly the perfect storm, certainly a crisis that is touching so many lives. Whether you suffer from addiction or not, most of us may have a family member or a loved one or a friend that's facing this challenge right now.
Of course, as a painkiller, hydrocodone, it's great. I mean, it is a great drug. I have broken both wrists and became quite familiar with hydrocodone for, a matter of a few days. But I found out, and it does the job, which is
Right.
what it was designed
That's
to
what
do.
it's supposed to do.
Right. But after about 4 or 5 days, like, okay, I need to stop taking this. And so I did. And I mean, I felt awful. I felt like I had the flu, did not want to eat. I mean, I really understood. I understood, number one, why you would want to keep taking something that made you. I mean, I did reach a point, and this is all during the rehabilitation from a broken wrist, that sense of euphoria
Right.
that apparently these drugs give.
We saw that quite a bit,
Yeah.
and when we were, before I came to Waco, when I was in San Antonio and I was working with the active duty, and the active duty who had been jumping out of airplanes, who had a lot
Lots
of
of pains,
from
yeah.
that, but we started as a nation seeing that there was abuse and there were problems with that, and they radically reduced that even with our active duty and our veterans. And I saw what people would say was a perfectly good soldier, Marine, never had a problem
Yeah.
because they were so dependent upon this drug. And all of a sudden it was taken away from them, wind up in criminal activity to get it because they couldn't get it. I remember specifically a very young Marine that I was working with who had medals all over and was a heroin addict because he needed some kind of relief, not just from the physical pain, but a lot of the mental pain that he was in. And as you say, it may start with just, I'm going to take this for my tooth, but then it would.
Oh,
it
yeah,
turns
a
into
backache or whatever. It can be a very innocent, or a
gateway.
real legitimate reason
Right.
to need a painkiller. But something like that is just for a temporary time.
And especially if,
Yeah.
addiction being a disease, if you are already predisposed
Right.
And we've been talking a lot about how this is the perfect storm because of the co-occurring disorder. If you suffer from depression, anxiety, trauma, how many of us have thought about depression, anxiety during COVID?
Yeah, that never had a problem with that
Right.
before because of the isolation
Right.
and fear.
Right.
There was a good deal of not understanding this virus and being afraid to death of catching it, and then what's going to happen, all that.
That certainly impacted people's ability to get help, even if maybe in a
Well, that's
normal
true.
world they might have said, I may be having a problem. I might need to go talk to a doctor about this or a counselor about this. Well, you couldn't do that.
Couldn't do
because
that.
you couldn't go to the doctor's office. You couldn't go to the counselor's office. We look at healthy ways to deal with our stress, like we go to the gym, right? Or we go out to eat, or we go and we see friends and family. How did that work out during COVID? The gyms were closed. We couldn't go see our families. We couldn't be with our friends. We couldn't do the
spiritual support of
right,
churches.
You couldn't go to church.
Churches weren't meeting.
It was definitely, you can see how it could have gotten out of hand. I mean, again, this was already rising before COVID. I think that's really important we note that, because we don't want to say that this is just a problem because of COVID. This was already on the rise before COVID with all of the deaths, like you mentioned. But now I think that the spotlight is really on us to how do we help people that are struggling, whether they are ready. We knew that they were struggling with addiction, or now because of the co-occurring disorder, they have the anxiety, they're drinking too much, they've turned to other drugs. How do we help them?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about Promises. And this is based in Houston?
No, actually, it's based in Tennessee.
Really?
And we're all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
I love to talk about our Texas facilities because, I'm running the one in Houston. We also have one in the Hill Country. We have one in Dallas. And when this is broadcasted, we will be talking about our new facility, which is Promises Brazos Valley, which is in College Station, up with the Aggies. We always talk about the Baylor Bears, right? But up in College Station. And on Friday, they're going to be having an open house. So if people want to go over and see that new facility, and, maybe pretty soon we'll be talking a little bit more about Waco.
Yeah, you are looking into moving further into Central Texas,
Right.
in the Waco area. And I know there's such a need for this kind of help for
Right.
people.
And what our outpatient clinics are called, we call them the PATH programs.
PATH.
Yes, and so providing access. We really, and I encourage anybody who's listening, if they want to go onto our Promises website, that they can look at a little bit more about that. But being able to provide a partial PHP program is what we call them, or an intensive outpatient program, or even we're looking a lot at medicated assisted treatment for people that may have to go on a medication to keep them sober. And I think that there's a lot of studies going on about that. Waco is a fabulous community of collaborative partners. I'm very excited to say that Dana Lafayette, which a lot of people might know that are listening to this, she was essential in working with our judicial system here, with substance use disorder here. I loved her so much, I begged her to come to Houston, and now she's one of our clinical directors in the program, and she too has a real love for Waco. And we were talking, and we said, wouldn't it be amazing if we could be able to provide some of the things that we're providing across Texas back to our friends and family in the Waco area? So yeah, we're looking at that and more to come.
Well, that is exciting, and that will make this kind of help even more accessible to people. But I guess you can go online and check more.
Right. And they can go to thepromises.com and look at that, because we talk a lot about promises. And the options there, you can look at my facility in Houston, looking at them throughout the nation. But We are in Tennessee, we're in Florida, we're in Massachusetts, Pennsylvania. I think you're people that are going to be seeing a whole lot more of this amazing company run. Our CEO is a social worker. I have the most fabulous boss, and he's a social worker. I started off here, when I got out of Baylor. That is what I started as a social worker and a licensed professional counselor. A lot of people don't know that I'm a clinician by background, but that just makes what I do even more meaningful, because I do feel like we're saving lives every day.
And, there's no question about
and
that.
And families, we think about the person that's suffering with addiction or depression or anxiety, but really the impact that has on the family, has the impact on the community. And we really want to be able to give an environment that they can go to, that's not judgmental, that they can get great care from, master's levels clinicians and doctors who really know how to treat addiction.
Well, getting the help that they need. And when we come back, we will talk a little bit more about some concrete things that are happening in Texas to sort of chip away at the opioid abuse issue, as well as others, as we're going to delve a little deeper. Thanks, DeLisa. We'll be right back.
Thanks.
Are you building a new business while managing a family? Are you tired of trying to balance home and work and everything seems to be coming up short? Then there's a podcast made just for you. Baking Your Business from Scratch is where we create the perfect recipe for building a successful business while managing your home and family with love. Come join us and see for yourself.
Back with DeLisa Russell, who is the group CEO at Promises Behavioral Health, Right Step Houston, and talking about the suffering that so many people have endured because of the COVID pandemic. I was just hearing recently that suicides are going through the roof, young people. So I think it's crucial that you're setting up these facilities in communities that have a pretty large population of young people, Bryan College Station and hopefully Waco soon.
Yeah, and when we're talking about things that have led along with the substance use disorder, the depression, the anxiety, you usually look at things like unemployment. A lot of people now are without jobs.
Oh, sure.
Changes, lack of structure. You mentioned about the teenagers and issues that they're having. We have a facility in Dallas that is actually working with the teenagers, and that may come to Bryan College Station as well. But right now we're handling that in Dallas because we see so many of our youth struggling. And I used to hang out up at the church when I was a kid, and we'd play tennis and volleyball and all of that. What are these kids doing if they're not able to go to band practice, if they don't have that support
and the structure that their lives used to have?
Right. And, and families struggling financially. So
it's a perfect storm, as you say. I know the state of Texas, though, is taking some steps in basically suing some of these drug makers in relation, again, to the opioid abuse issue. I mean, it's a legitimate pharmaceutical that does a good thing when it's used properly, but the misuse of it has caused so many deaths.
And what I'm really the most happy about all of that is that it's not just pointing the finger at the person who is suffering from the addiction. They are already coping with that disease and having to work on themselves. But it's looking at the root causes in the much bigger picture than just that individual. So, that says a lot, that when you really have to look at the root causes of what's going on and not just pointing a finger or being judgmental or having stigma on the individual who's already suffering.
Yeah, so much of it is self-medication, knowing that there's something going on, something wrong, and yet what we've seen through the COVID shutdowns and the lockdowns, we were having everything delivered to our houses. It made it that much easier for maybe somebody with a problem with alcohol. It was brought to the door.
Right. I mean, you could order your Mexican food to go with a gallon of margaritas, and how does that help someone that's already suffering? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love some good fajitas, but when you start looking at somebody who's already isolated, already having issues, you can see how, again, the perfect storm.
Yeah, you told me the story. You and your husband were in the midst of all that. Well, let's get out of the house and go take a drive, whatever. See if there's a grocery store open.
It was unbelievable. We couldn't find a grocery store that was open. We couldn't find anything that was open. We saw one light that was on in the strip center, and it was the liquor store. I mean, what is that? I mean, when you can't go buy milk, but you can go buy vodka and whiskey, I think there's a problem.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the family when there's a loved one who has a problem with substance abuse, is suffering from mental issues, you want to help, but you don't really know how to help, what to do. What's your advice to the family members of loved one?
I mean, looking at the changes, looking at the isolation, that was hard during COVID because we didn't see our loved ones as much. We weren't talking to them face to face. We would just spend a few moments on the phone. But really looking at what's going on with them, being able to talk. And luckily now we're opening back up, right? We're getting back out and everything again.
I think people are feeling more comfortable, and the weather is nicer, so being outside is always a good thing.
And I think that, but when people do start getting out more, we're gonna look around, and there's gonna be some friends and family that we're not seeing, and checking on them and seeing what's really going on with them. Maybe if they're getting back in with their doctors and getting back to church and getting back to those ways that they coped. If we see that they are really isolating in that, asking those questions without judgment, without labeling it and everything, but because this is not such an isolated problem. Again, even if you are not suffering, I am sure everybody out there that's listening right now has someone that they're thinking about while they're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, it's the isolation and the loneliness that has been so devastating to folks too, I think.
Right. I mean, and we talked
about... And not really knowing how to reach out or who to reach out to.
Everybody that's listening to this knows how much I love my veterans and love our military and everything. And I think a lot of times whenever we were thinking about our servicemen and women, and, they may be doing a little bit too much drinking or whatever, because that's what, because of what they went through. We
make excuses.
I'm not saying, not.
Or you understand it. Or
understand
whatever,
or, excusing it, but in a way we kind of left it over to the side a little bit. What we have gone through as a nation, what we've gone through as a world in this last year has been trauma.
Yes.
No matter what age you're talking about, this has been a traumatic experience for everyone because it changed the entire world as we know it. We didn't know what else was coming. We didn't know, what to do. We were given so many different messages on what was
true.
Best.
Right.
So if
we were basically we were feeling our way along,
right, with
an unknown, and that's unsettling,
right,
in and of itself.
And that right there, I mean, if anything, there, I think it opens that door for some more discussions and maybe some more acceptance that we've all gone through something really hard, right? A lot of times when we go through something hard, it brings us together, right? When you go through things, it brings you together, and it really helps you see the world through other people's eyes. And I really charge people that are listening to this to think about that, and when they're thinking about reaching out to others and letting them know, look, you've been through something difficult. Now what are we going to do? Because just like
we can't keep going on the way we are now.
PTSD doesn't have to be a permanent diagnosis, right, and neither does addiction.
Right.
It's time that we get some people some help. We give them the hope, and if they need to call me up at Houston, or if they need to go to College Station and see my friend Cameron or Dallas or Hill Country, there's wonderful options out there that are looking, again, not just at the addiction, but looking at the co-occurring depression, anxiety. I mean, we've really changed on how we need to treat people that are going through this.
And of course, you offer in-person
Yes.
care, but also online. You know,
At
if you
our
need
Houston,
to stay, right, you can
right.
do a Zoom call or whatever and still get
Right.
that counseling
There's
and help.
levels of care. I mean, everything from residential service where someone may come and stay 30
And stay
days
there.
with me. They may come to partial where they're coming every day. They may come to intensive outpatient where they only come a couple of days a week. And like what you mentioned, we have some options that they can do things virtually as well.
So the Waco facility, which is a dream right now, but really more than a dream, right? You're actually looking for
We're
places.
looking. We've been looking around town. We've been
So
talking.
how big a facility are you looking? What kind of place are you looking for?
Well, probably something around 5,000 square feet and everything. What I'm doing even here while I'm talking to you, I'm really looking at the people in the community that I got to know so well over the One Stop, the people that we could be collaborating with and saying, what is it that you need in Central Texas? How can we help? And everything. These are some of the things that we can offer. But I think that anytime you go into a community, really looking at those needs, really looking on how we can collaborate. But we're here looking, and there's nothing I'd love more than to be back in town more often. Now, I'm not leaving Houston, but it just gives me a great excuse.
You really
to come.
just got there, right? You haven't been there that long.
It gives me a great excuse to, like even what
be
my
back.
husband says whenever we come and we visit, and like we often do, my mom is still here. We always say, it's really good to be home.
Yeah, well, it's always good to have you and hear about the good work that you're doing. It's kind of a different, in a way, than the Veterans One Stop, but still working with folks who need that extra help,
And it's very exciting. I still am working with veterans. This allows me not to just work with veterans, but I am because with the Mission Act, which was a wonderful thing that was passed, veterans are allowed to go outside of the VA for help.
Right.
And so we are seeing there are times that about half of the facility in Houston is a veteran.
Really?
And so that's very exciting. And also with family members, I always say to each and every one of them that come in, you were my military family. How can I support you? And it does allow, that there's a bond there with that as well. But we don't just treat veterans, but to me, that's always a special place in my heart. And I'm really excited that we're able to do that as well in Houston.
Well, it's a great work you're doing. And I like to end these visits with a little questionnaire. It's similar to the one the late, great James Lipton used on Inside the Actor's Studio. If that rings a bell. May or may not. What is your favorite word?
Oh, my goodness. Again, it kind of goes back to what I've done is resiliency. Resiliency is a beautiful word. Of course, it's overused sometimes, but resiliency. And no matter what you're faced with, whether it's addiction, whether it's depression, anxiety, financial stressors, when you're resilient, when you bond with those around you, where you reach out and get the help that you need, you can be that person that you were before or even better.
Yeah, there's a new day.
There's always a new day. So
Yeah.
resiliency.
Yeah, oh, that's great. What's your least favorite word?
Well, my husband would probably say that my least favorite word is no, because he says I refuse to ever listen to the word no. And if you say no, I'm going to find a way to get around it and ask you for a yes. And so I would probably just say the word no, because don't ever say that you can't and there's no hope or there's no options. Just keep looking for that way to get to yes.
Well, then what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
In my home, we are really about servant leadership. That defines who we are. My husband served 25 years in the military. My daughter did so many things here in town. My son, bless his heart, any of those Aggies that are listening, he's in the Aggie magazine this month because of things he's doing. He's serving. He's in Korea. Please pray for him.
Oh,
he's
yeah.
right on the line in Army Medical right now. But really, service. That the ability to do something outside myself, and it's not DeLisa doing it. I think there's something that's greater that leads us to be where we're supposed to be and helps the people that are listening or people that are out there that need that to hear this. I believe that there's a divine guidance that truly brings us all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Then what turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
I think that the judgmental, the stigma, that goes along with anything. We struggled that with veterans. With people that are going through that you think that they can never change. We get that in their head that they'll never be any different. They'll never be any better.
That's just not true.
If you have hope and you have faith in God, there's nothing that can't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what is your favorite sound? What sound do you love the most?
Whenever I was sitting at my house in Woodway, one of my favorite things to do, I love coffee, would be to sit and drink my coffee and listen to the birds. I think that there is something beautifully therapeutic about how they're singing. And, we might complain that it's too cold outside, it's too wet outside, I don't have enough worms, right? But not them. They're out there just singing, and their noise is bringing joy to us. So I'd say birds.
Yeah, very good. Well, what's your least favorite sound?
Well, again, it might just be silence, because I love people so much, right? I love conversation and laughter and everything. It's very hard for me to just not hear anything. I know we're supposed to take that time and everything, but silence is not always my friend.
Not always golden. What other profession would you have wanted to try besides what you're doing now?
It's interesting. My plan was always to go to Baylor Law School.
Oh, really?
For those of you that don't know my background, my daddy was a cattle rancher up in Northeast Texas, and I came back to Texas after his death to try to help with that. But I had always wanted to serve in that manner, or look at Washington. Of course, I don't know if I want to be in Washington these days. I definitely respect Pete Sessions and all the others that are up there right now in that mess. But
I just visited last week with Bill Flores to talk about his decade of service there. And
right.
There are ups and downs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to service, right? I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing as the bigger picture? What do we do to make the world a better place in our little small way? You know, I think that's the greatest thing at the end is, when I'm gone, was there anything that I did in this world, even if it was just helping one person, one veteran, raising two amazing kids that they can go and do things, but can I make a difference in this world?
What profession or job do you would not want to do?
Well, I will say that whenever I was at Baylor, I needed to put food on the table, and I worked in a daycare center, and that people were biting and crying and screaming and pulling hair. And so God bless our teachers, whether it's at a preschool
Yeah.
or a high school or anything like
Nursery
that.
worker,
You
anyhow.
have the patience of Job.
That's a calling.
You know, it is a calling, and it was not DeLisa's calling.
Yeah.
But I did do it for a little while because like anything else, anything I do, I say I'm going to be able to show that I can stick with it and stay there for a while. But God bless our teachers, because that is a hard job.
That's a tough job. Well, finally, what do you want to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
You know, it's like that Garth Brooks song whenever he's saying "Good ride, cowboy, good ride." I'm not a cowboy, but I think that he would say, good job, thank you, or even though things were tough, you didn't give up. If we really look at every person that we serve as Christ and what would we do for that person, I hope that my life can reflect my heart.
Well, it has, I can say. And how can folks learn more information about Promises?
They can go again to our website. I think most people will jump on their computer or their phone at www.promises.com. Look
Very
at our
easy.
facilities throughout Texas. If you are in college,
And all the different services that you have.
all
are
the
right
different
there.
things. If you're in College Station next Friday, stop by and see Miss Cameron, who is our CEO there. Again, Dallas, Hill Country. But if you have a loved one, or if you are suffering from this disease and everything, reach out to us at Promises. Reach out to someone. This doesn't have to be the end of your story.
Well said. Thank you so much, DeLisa Russell.
Thank you
being
for
with us.
having me, Ann.
It's been fun.
Thank you.
Central Texas Living is part of the Rogue Media Network family. Be sure to check out their other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. Please rate us 5 stars on iTunes and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Join us again soon for more Central Texas Living, the podcast.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.